After escaping her abusive husband with nothing but bruises and a fake name, she stumbles into a neon-lit bar, praying for a place to disappear. But the bar belongs to the Vampire King, a ruthless ruler who scents both her fear and her courage, and claims her as under his protection. Now, hunted by her past and entangled in a world of fangs, blood, and forbidden desire, she must decide which monster she'll trust with her life and her heart. Let me tell you about the night she finally ran. Not from a monster in the dark, but from the man who had once sworn to love her. Rain hammered the city in hard, silver lines as she stumbled down the sidewalk, one hand pressed to the fading bruise on her cheek, the other clutching a small backpack against her chest. The ring that used to sit on her finger lay somewhere on the kitchen floor of a house she hoped never to see again. Her cheap sneakers slapped through puddles, soaking through, but she didn't slow down. Every car that passed made her flinch. Every flash of headlights felt like his. Her name was Sara, but tonight, to stay alive, she had decided she was going to be someone else. Someone braver. Someone who didn't apologize for existing. She tasted metal and salt on her tongue and realized she'd bitten her lip without noticing. The street around her was almost empty, just the smell of wet asphalt, fried food from a late-night diner across the road, and the low hum of the city that never truly slept. She didn't have a plan, not really. Just a phone on silent in her pocket, some cash stuffed inside her sock, and the desperate knowledge that going back meant surrendering the last piece of herself she still recognized. A bus stop ahead glowed faintly under a flickering streetlight, but the timetable blurred through her tears. She needed somewhere now, somewhere with people, somewhere he might hesitate to cause another scene. That was when she saw the bar. It announced itself with a single word burning in crimson neon over the door. ECLIPSE. The letters hissed softly in the rain, casting a red halo over the entrance and the tall man in black standing guard. Music pulsed from inside, low and velvety, more like a heartbeat than a song. Warm light spilled out every time the door opened, along with a swirl of laughter, clinking glasses, and something else she couldn't name, a kind of charged energy that raised the small hairs along her arms. Sara almost kept walking. Bars meant alcohol, and alcohol meant men who stared too long and touched without asking. But the street behind her felt too open, too exposed, and she could already hear her husband's voice in her memory, cold and furious. "You think you can hide from me?" Her feet made the decision before her mind did, veering toward the red doorway. The bouncer's eyes swept over her in one practiced glance, taking in the wet hair plastered to her face, the too thin sweater, the trembling hands. For a tense second, she thought he might turn her away, tell her she did fit the vibe, send her back into the storm and the fear she'd just escaped. Instead, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. He stepped aside and pulled the heavy door open for her. "In you go," he said quietly. "You look like you need warmth more than ID tonight." The rush of heat and sound hit her the moment she stepped inside. ECLIPSE was all dark wood and soft crimson, with chandeliers that dripped warm light like champagne bubbles. The air smelled of citrus, something smoky and a little sweet, and far in the back a live band played a slow, moody tune that curled around the room like fog. People filled the space, women in sparkly dresses, men in crisp shirts and leather jackets, a few figures in elegant black who moved through the crowd with almost unnatural grace. Sara felt suddenly small and out of place, a dripping stray animal thrown into a room full of sleek, polished creatures. She told herself to turn around, to leave before someone asked what she was doing there, but the door thudded shut behind her with a final, heavy sound, cutting off the rain and the road and the world she'd just fled. She was inside now, and strangely, the city felt a little farther away. She kept her eyes down and made her way to the bar, weaving between groups of laughing strangers. Music vibrated through the soles of her shoes, steady and hypnotic. At the long counter, golden light shimmered over rows of bottles in every shade of amber and jewel-bright color. The bartender, dark-haired, with sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms marked by faint silver scars, looked up as she approached. "What can I get you?" he asked, voice smooth but sharp enough that she could tell he missed nothing. "Water," she managed. "Just water, please." He blinked, like he hadn't heard that answer in a long time, then nodded and reached for a glass. "You okay?" he asked casually as he filled it from a tall, chilled carafe. The question was simple, but there was something real in it, a human concern that almost undid her. Sara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just long day." The lie tasted heavier than the rainwater dripping from her hair. He slid the glass toward her, and without a word, placed a folded bar towel beside it so she could dry her hands. That small kindness hit her harder than it should have. In the home she'd just left, kindness had always come with conditions, with a price. She wrapped her fingers around the glass, its coldness grounding her. For a moment, the bar faded into a blur of sound and light as she focused on breathing in, breathing out. She was safe. For now, he didn't know where she was. No one did. Upstairs, on a shadowed balcony overlooking the bar, the owner watched her. He sat alone at a table that the staff instinctively kept clear, a quiet island in the sea of movement and laughter below. From there, King Valen Thorne had a perfect view of his kingdom. He saw everything, the tiny arguments blooming like sparks before a fight, the first shy smiles of strangers who might leave together, the hands that wandered where they weren't welcome. He watched, and he decided what the night would allow. Valen had ruled the city's hidden hours for longer than anyone downstairs could have imagined. The world called him a myth, a rumor with sharp teeth. In truth, he was something older, something colder, wrapped in a suit of immaculate black and a face that rarely gave away more than polite curiosity. Tonight his long, white blonde hair was tied back at the nape of his neck, a contrast to skin that no sunlight touched anymore. His eyes, when they were not hiding behind a veil of bored gold, could burn like the edge of dawn. He had told himself he'd seen every kind of sorrow pass through his doors. Runaways, broken hearts, people who had lost jobs, homes, families, and came here to forget for a few hours, to drown themselves in music and color and the soft darkness of ECLIPSE. But then he saw the woman dripping onto his bar stool. Valen's attention sharpened without his permission. At first it was just the outline, thin shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow, the haunted way her gaze tracked every exit as she crossed the room. Then came the details he couldn't ignore, the faint yellowing mark on her cheek that said it was almost, but not quite, an old bruise. The way her hands trembled when she reached for the glass. The ring-shaped indentation on her bare finger, still reddened from recent habit. More than that, he heard her. From where he sat, above the music and chatter, his senses picked up what no human ear could. The staccato pace of her heartbeat, skipping every time someone laughed too loudly behind her. The ragged pull of her breath. The whisper of fabric where she clutched at her backpack as if it contained the last pieces of her life. Valen exhaled slowly. Once, centuries ago, he might have dismissed her. Humans broke all the time. It was what their soft, brief lives were built to do. He had been a different kind of king then, all hunger and power, taking and taking because the night had told him he could. Compassion was a luxury, and he had lived without it for far too long. But eternity changes a man, even an immortal one. He stood, chair legs barely making a sound against the polished floor, and descended the staircase that wound down into the heart of the bar. As he moved, the crowd shifted without realizing they were doing it, bodies angling just enough to clear his path. Some recognized him and fell silent. Others only felt the instinctive shiver of something old and dangerous passing nearby. Sara didn't see him at first. She was focused on the condensation beating down her glass, tracing one droplet with the tip of her finger like a child. She was wondering if she should call anyone. Her mother lived 2 states away and hadn't believed her the first time she'd said, "He scares me, Mom." Her one close friend had gently suggested couples therapy, as if you could teach someone not to enjoy control. Maya, she thought suddenly, tasting the word. If she had to give a name tonight, she'd give that one. A small act of rebellion, invisible but real. "Rough evening," a voice asked, smooth as velvet and colder than the glass in her hands. She looked up, and the world narrowed. The man standing beside her was wrong, in a way that didn't show in any one feature but in the total of them. He was tall, his dark shirt and jacket fitting him as if they'd been sewn directly onto his frame. His hair was pale, almost silver under the bar lights, pulled back from a face that was too still, too precise, like a sculpture come to life. It would have been easy to call him beautiful, but that wasn't quite it. Beautiful things invited approach. He made people want to keep a respectful distance. And yet, his eyes gave him away. They were gold, yes, but not the flat gold of costume contact lenses. They held layers, amber near the pupil, brighter rings toward the edges, a depth that suggested both age and a kind of careful curiosity. When he looked at her, it felt like stepping into warm light after too long in the cold. Unsettling, but not unkind. "I've had better," she said, because her mouth always chose sarcasm when the rest of her body chose fear. One corner of his mouth lifted. "We tend to attract people on their worst nights. It's part of the charm of the place." He nodded at her glass. "May I?" Before she could answer, he signaled to the bartender. "Another on the house, and something hot tea, ginger and honey." "You don't have to do that," Sara said quickly. I don't have much money." "Then it's fortunate we're not asking for any." His tone was light, but there was a quiet finality in it, a king's decision disguised as hospitality. "Consider it a house rule. No one leaves ECLIPSE colder than when they arrived." Something in her chest loosened. Maybe it was the simple decency of it, or the way he didn't push, didn't demand explanations. He didn't lean in. He didn't ask her name right away. He simply stood there, a calm presence holding back the chaos of the night. "Thank you," she murmured. He inclined his head slightly, as if accepting thanks for much greater things. "You're shivering," he observed. "The back room is warmer, quieter too. You're welcome to sit there if the crowd is a lot." The offer made her bristle on instinct. She'd spent too long around a man who wrapped his control in soft words. "Why?" she asked, meeting his eyes. "What do you want?" For a second, something raw flashed across his face, gone so fast she might have imagined it. Hurt? Surprise? Then his expression smoothed out again, and he looked, strangely, almost humbled. "I own this place," he said simply. "Valen." He offered his hand, not reaching for hers, just letting it hang between them like a question. "I don't like seeing anyone in my house looking like they're one loud noise away from bolting into traffic. That's all." She stared at his hand, at the pale, long fingers, the silver ring on his index finger etched with symbols she didn't recognize. No pressure, no demand, just a choice. Slowly, she shook it. His skin was cool, but not the dead chill she expected. More like stone that had never known sunlight, yet somehow held warmth deep inside. "Maya," she lied softly. His eyes flickered, a subtle narrowing that said he heard the false note in her voice, but he didn't call her on it. Instead, he gave a small nod as if to say, "Your secrets are safe here, even the name you don't trust me with." "Well then, Maya," he replied. "Tonight you are a guest of the king. No one bothers you here." The words were said with a faint hint of humor, but something in the air shifted when he spoke them, a tiny ripple through the room. The bartender glanced their way, then subtly adjusted his position, as if putting himself between her and the rest of the bar. A server passing by dipped her head in Valen's direction, the small bow of someone who recognized authority. King, Sara thought, he really believes that. The idea should have been ridiculous, but somehow, in this place of shadows and red light, it was. She sipped the new glass of water, then the hot tea when it arrived, feeling warmth spread through her fingers and chest. For the first time that night, her breathing began to even out. She could almost pretend she was just another woman out late, taking a break from a busy life, instead of someone who had left behind a house full of broken promises and slammed doors. "You know," Valen said after a quiet moment, his voice softer, more reflective, "it takes a particular kind of courage to walk away from something that's killing you slowly. People like to praise bravery in battle, grand gestures, big speeches. They forget about the quiet kind, the one that looks like a woman in wet sneakers stepping into a bar alone." Her throat tightened. "You don't even know me." "I know pain when I see it," he answered. "And I know resilience. They leave similar marks." Behind his calm words, there was something else, an echo of his own story she could not yet see. It made his kindness feel less like charity and more like recognition, one scarred soul to another. She looked at him properly then, not just at the surface perfection, but at the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his shoulders carried a weight that had nothing to do with the tailored jacket he wore. "Why do you care?" she whispered before she could stop herself. "Because," he said, and this time his gaze dropped to her still red ring mark, "I know what monsters can look like, and sometimes they look very human." The words landed in her chest like a stone tossed into deep water. No one had ever called her husband a monster out loud. People called him charming, successful, passionate. Even she had once believed those things before the apologies turned into patterns and the promises turned into chains. She swallowed hard, blinking fast. "You don't have to." Valen's head snapped up, his expression sharpening so suddenly it stole the rest of her sentence. The easy calm vanished. The air around him seemed to shift temperature, going from warm to something crackling and cold. His gaze slid past her, toward the door of the bar as if he'd heard something no one else had. His gold eyes darkened, a faint ring of molten amber brightening near the pupil. The music still played. The laughter continued. But under it all, something in the atmosphere tightened. "What is it?" Sara asked, dread curling back into her stomach like smoke. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that his presence was a shield, his body positioned between her and the rest of the room. When he spoke, his voice carried a depth that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "Someone just crossed my threshold with rage in his blood," Valen murmured, "and you're scent on his mind." Her heart stopped for a beat, then slammed back into rhythm so hard it made her dizzy. She turned toward the entrance just as the heavy door of ECLIPSE swung open, letting in a gust of cold, wet air. A familiar silhouette filled the frame, broad shoulders, expensive coat, the posture of a man who believed the world owed him space. Even from across the room, she knew him. Her husband had found her. All the warmth in her limbs evaporated at once. Her grip tightened on the edge of the bar until her knuckles blanched. Instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear into the crowd, but her legs wouldn't move. "Don't," Valen said quietly, not taking his eyes off the man at the door. The softness was gone from his voice now, replaced by something ancient and unyielding. "Running alone is how prey gets hurt. Stay behind me, Maya." "How do you know?" Her question broke off as he turned to her fully for a heartbeat, and she saw it. His pupils had thinned to slits, glowing gold bright as candle flames in the dim light. For one impossible second, his mouth parted just enough that she glimpsed the hint of teeth too sharp, too perfect to be entirely human. The king of this bar of this night was not a man at all. Valen stepped forward, placing himself squarely between her and the approaching figure, shoulders relaxed but radiating a quiet, lethal promise. The room seemed to tilt around him as conversations faltered and eyes turned, sensing a storm about to break. "You took enough from her," he said under his breath, the words meant for the man who could not yet hear them, and perhaps, in some way, for the ghosts of his own past. "You will take nothing else." Sara's breath hitched, torn between terror of the familiar monster at the door and fascination with the unfamiliar one standing in front of her, choosing to shield rather than devour. In that fragile, electric moment, with rain blowing in through the open door and the vampire king's eyes burning like twin suns, everything hung in the balance. And the night decided what kind of story it was going to be. The storm followed him inside. Cold air knifed through the warmth of ECLIPSE as the door swung shut behind the man in the expensive coat. He shook rain from his sleeves like he owned the weather, eyes scanning the room with impatient, predatory focus. Conversations faltered. The music kept playing, but it felt suddenly too soft, like a soundtrack holding its breath. Sara's lungs forgot how to work. For a heartbeat, she was back in their kitchen, back in the narrow hallway with no windows, back in the car when he pressed his foot on the gas just a little too hard to make a point. Her mind went blank except for one thought, flashing in red. He found me. He always finds me. Valen's voice brushed her ear, low and steady. Look at me, not at him. She forced her eyes away from the doorway and up to his face. The gold in his gaze had cooled, turning flat and dangerous, but when he looked at her, there was nothing harsh there. Just focus, like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the part of himself that cared about rules. Breathe, he murmured. In through your nose, count to 4, out through your mouth, count again. She obeyed because it was easier than thinking. The air tasted like citrus and smoke and the faintest trace of something metallic she couldn't name. Her hands shook around the warm cup of tea. Down by the door, her husband spotted her. His whole body shifted, shoulders tightening, chin lifting with the certainty that the room would part for him. And it did, almost out of habit. People sidestepped, sensing the sharpness of his mood. He started toward the bar in a straight, angry line. She's with me, Valen said softly, almost to himself. He just doesn't know it yet. Sara's heart slammed against her ribs. Please, she whispered, don't make a scene, he'll. He won't do anything here that I don't allow, Valen cut in, calm but absolute. And tonight I allow very little. Her husband reached them, stopping just short of Valen's shoulder. Up close, his presence felt painfully familiar. The expensive cologne she used to like, the controlled smile that could appear and disappear like a knife being sheathed. Raindrops clung to his dark hair, glinting in the red light. There you are, he said, ignoring Valen completely. His gaze locked on Sara and his voice slid into that public tone, smooth and charming. You scared me, sweetheart. Running out like that, you know that's not safe. Her fingers dug into the bar. Sweetheart, in front of strangers. He was playing his role perfectly. Valen didn't move, but the space around him seemed to harden. She's not alone, he said quietly. The polite edge in his words was so sharp it could have sliced glass. And you are blocking my view. Only then did her husband turn to actually look at him. The amused superiority in his face flickered, just for a second. Valen towered over him by an inch or two, not by much, but there was something in his posture that made the difference feel like miles. This is between me and my wife, her husband said, jaw tightening. Why don't you mind your bar, friend? Valen studied him as if examining a problem he hadn't decided how to solve. Your wife, he repeated. His eyes dipped deliberately to Sara's bare ring finger. I see no sign of that belonging here. Because she took it off, her husband snapped. He leaned sideways, trying to look past Valen at her. Sara, come on, let's go home. We can talk without an audience. The sound of her name in his mouth made her flinch. A few people nearby exchanged glances, the bartender's jaw set. But no one stepped in. They were all watching Valen. He knows your name, Valen said softly, still facing forward, still blocking him. Do you wish to leave with him, Sara? The question dropped into the room like a stone into still water. He was giving her the choice out loud, in front of witnesses. No quiet hallway, no door closed with a sharp click, no way to pretend later she'd simply got confused. Her throat felt too tight for air, let alone words. Old instincts screamed at her, say yes. Smile, fix it, don't make him angry. But another voice, quieter and stubborn, rose beneath the fear. It sounded a little like Valen's and a little like her own, from years before she'd learned to walk on eggshells. You ran because you wanted something better than surviving. She licked her lips. I don't want to go, she whispered. Her husband's smile didn't break, it just stiffened. You're upset, he said quickly to Valen, as if translating. She doesn't mean that. She's not herself when she's like this. Valen tilted his head, golden eyes narrowing. She seems very clear to me. His next words were quiet, but the room carried them. No means no in my house, to everyone. A murmur rippled through nearby tables. Her husband's facade cracked, anger flashing hot in his eyes before he smoothed it over again. I don't know who you think you are, he hissed, voice dropping. But this is a family matter. She belongs with me. Sara flinched at the word. Belongs. Valen's expression didn't change, but something in his gaze turned glacial. No, he said. She belongs to herself. She is a guest under my roof. That outranks whatever claim you imagine you have. Her husband laughed, short and disbelieving. Your roof? What are you, some kind of king? Valen smiled then, slow and humorless. For a moment, the light caught on something too sharp behind his lips. Something like that. He stepped forward the smallest fraction, and it was enough to force the other man to shift back. The movement was subtle, but everyone saw who had given ground. You're leaving now, Valen continued, tone still conversational. You will not raise your voice at her again. You will not follow her. You will not wait outside the door like a shadow. Do you understand? Or what? The charm dropped completely from her husband's face, revealing the raw anger beneath. You'll throw me out of your little club. Touch me and I'll. He reached out, not for Valen, but around him, fingers grasping toward Sara's wrist the way they always had when he wanted to end an argument by simply taking her elsewhere. Valen moved. It was so fast she almost didn't see it. One moment her husband's hand was cutting through the air toward her. The next, Valen's pale fingers wrapped around his wrist with precise, unshakable control. No jerk, no display of strength, just a firm, unyielding hold that stopped the motion cold. Don't, Valen said, and the word carried a depth that made the lights above them tremble ever so slightly. Her husband tried to pull back. His face twisted when he realized he couldn't. The veins in his neck stood out. Valen's hand didn't even seem to tighten. What are you? He breathed, more rattled by the invisible strength than he wanted to admit. Valen's eyes brightened, molten gold bleeding into the amber. The last person you should have followed her to, he answered softly. Then his tone changed, lower, layered with something that made the small hairs along Sara's arms rise. Look at me. Her husband resisted for a heartbeat, then his gaze jerked up, caught by Valen's. The spinning anger in his eyes slowed, like water freezing mid-flow. The noise of the bar receded until all Sara could hear was the faint hum of electricity and the slow, measured sound of her own breathing. You will listen, Valen said, each word dropping heavy and deliberate. You will walk out of my door. You will go home alone. You will sleep. In the morning, you will remember only that she is safe and that following her makes you less than the man you pretend to be. Each time you think of searching, you will feel tired, bored. You will find better things to do. Her husband's mouth opened, but no words came out. His eyes had gone slightly unfocused, pupils wide. Sara watched, both terrified and unable to look away, as Valen's grip softened and then released. The other man's arm dropped to his side like he'd forgotten what he'd been about to do. Turn around, Valen said gently. Go. Her husband blinked once, twice, like someone waking. Without glancing back at Sara, he pivoted stiffly and walked toward the door. The crowd parted again, but this time the space felt colder. The bouncer opened the door without a word, rain blew in, then the door shut and he was gone. Silence hung for a long second, then the bar exhaled. Music swelled back to full volume, glasses clinked, conversations restarted, louder now, trying to smooth over the crack that had just opened in the night. Sara stared at the closed door, pulse racing so hard she felt slightly sick. Logic told her to run while she could, before the strange spell broke, before her husband remembered and came back angrier than ever. Another part of her wanted to collapse right there on the floor and never move again. But above those panicked impulses rose one clear, shaking question. She turned to Valen, to the man whose eyes still held that unnatural glow, whose hand had been cool iron around her husband's wrist, whose voice had bent another person's will like wet wire. "What?" Her voice came out as a croak. She swallowed and tried again. "What did you just do to him?" Valen looked at her for a long moment, the space between them suddenly too full of things unsaid. The dangerous light faded slowly from his gaze, leaving only a deep, quiet sadness in its wake. "Something I promised myself I'd never do again," he said softly. Her skin prickled. "Again," she whispered, "what are you?" He hesitated, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff he knew well. The gentle king, the courteous bar owner, the protector, those faces hovered for a heartbeat, then slipped aside, revealing the truth beneath. "Do you really want to know?" he asked. And Sara, still shaking, still smelling rain and fear and tea, realized that whatever answer he gave would change more than just her night. It might change the shape of her whole life. The word formed on her lips before she could stop it, fragile but sure. "Yes,"